My latest FPL draft has a 95% AI rating, and it's got both Haaland and Salah in it. And I'm going to take you through it in this video. Alright, so I'm going to start off then by talking about the goalkeepers and defenders that I've picked. And I wanted to take you through a few useful sources of data, projections, stats, etc. that I've used to help pick my team. What I've got here is rankings of clean sheet odds for the first 6 game weeks of the Premier League. You can see the 20 teams ranked here. And obviously, you know, teams you want to pick players from defensively are going to be ones that rank highly for clean sheet odds, right? So the top 5 are Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, Aston Villa, and Crystal Palace. One thing that I've taken away from these stats is my goalkeeper pick, right? I don't really want to be spending much more than 4.5 million on a goalkeeper this season. Looking at the first 6 fixtures and the clean sheet odds, of all of the 4.5 million goalkeepers available in the game, Dean Henderson at Crystal Palace is the best for clean sheet odds. And I also think he's going to keep a decent amount of saves. So just showing where I've gotten these stats from, it's 11ify. I'll leave a link to 11ify in the description below. Really good source of projected data that's useful for FPL, and it's basically helped me decide who my goalkeeper is going to be. Next up, I wanted to look at Rob T FPL's data from Twitter. So he takes data from spread betting markets. So this is a combination basically of bookies and bookmakers odds. Now, why I like this data so much is quite simply, bookies and bookmakers spend the most money of anyone making projected algorithms for outcomes in football matches, right? Because ultimately, their profits depend upon it. They want to be as accurate as possible when it comes to projecting outcomes of football games, players getting returns, you know, etc., etc. So, in my mind, the best projections available are ones that are done by bookmakers. And you can see here the top players in the game the top defenders in the game for expected goal involvements or projected goal involvements. Top 5 being Trent Alexander-Arnold, Pedro Porro, Trippier, Robertson, Reece James, who's obviously already injured again. You got Munoz, Martson, Leif Davies of Ipswich, who could be quite an interesting option. I'd probably class him very similar to maybe Alfie Doughty of last season, and then Guardiola of Man City. That's a bit more than 6, but what I'll also do, just leave this on your screen. So pause the video if you feel, and you can have a look at the projected goal involvements for defenders yourself to help you pick your team. So with all that in mind then, here is what I've gone for. So Dean Henderson goal, like I said, I think he's probably the best defender, best goalkeeper, sorry, in the game. I genuinely do actually think he will probably be the top scoring goalkeeper overall this season, because the best goalkeepers historically in FPL, right, they keep, I'd say, like an average amount of clean sheets, and they get saves bonus points pretty much every game. And I think Dean Henderson will get that for Crystal Palace this season. Defensively, I've gone for Trent Alexander-Arnold. You know, Liverpool ranked fairly highly for clean sheet odds for the first 6 game weeks. And I would say, you know, we saw the expected goal involvements or projected goal involvements for defenders. Trent was way out in front. So Liverpool have very decent clean sheet odds, and Trent is expected to get the most attacking returns of any defender across the season. So I also think of him as a player that can genuinely get solid, decent returns through 3 different means, that being goals, assists, and clean sheets, right? I would say an average season for Trent, right, would be probably 5 goals, 10 assists, 10 clean sheets, 25 returns that is across the season, not forgetting bonus points, of course. I imagine if he gets returns in games, he's going to get bonus points as well. All of that for 7 million. 25 potential returns I project him to get. Somewhere about that this season. I know it's a projection, no one can be sure. But he does that, he's 7 million. I think that's really good value. Mykolenko and Lewis Hall. Mykolenko, I think, offers a good chance of clean sheets. Rotates quite nicely with players I've got on my bench as well, who I'll obviously reveal towards the end of the video. Everton kept 13 clean sheets last season, and I think Mykolenko is probably the most attacking of the starting Everton defenders. So makes sense to go for him based on that. Lewis Hall has looked really, really good for Newcastle in pre-season. I'm backing him to start at left-back. Obviously, I've picked him in my team. He's looked really attacking as well. Been adopting some really, really attacking positions for them. His expected points data is looking really good. All of these expected points you're seeing there under the players, by the way, are courtesy of Fantasy Football Hub. Up until the Game Week 1 deadline, I can get you 50% off a membership to Fantasy Football Hub. If you want to see this expected points data for yourself and get your teams rated by AI, you can do, and you can sign up to Fantasy Football Hub in the description below. Yeah, that's the defense. All right then, I just wanted to talk through some other 4.5 million defender options because I just think there are so many available in this game. You don't necessarily have to go for the two that I have. I'm not going to go through them all. I would say my picks that I haven't actually got in my team already. Konsa, I think, is very respectable. Anderson, Gahey, Richards of Palace. I'd probably say Anderson's probably the best, unless, of course, he moves to Fulham. Lewis Dunk, his opening fixtures are a bit tough, but as the season goes on, I think Brighton will start to keep some more clean sheets, and he offers some really good goal threat. Aït-Nouri as well. You know, he spent time last season playing at Wolves as basically a left winger, which, you know, for a 4.5 million defender is, I think, really attractive. First couple of fixtures for him, well, first three fixtures, I'd say, are actually really quite tough. So yeah, I'll probably be put off going for him from the start with those fixtures, but later on in the season, he's for sure going to become an option. And Anthony Robinson of Fulham, right? He has got Man United away first up. So if you pick him, you could probably avoid starting him in game week 1 and probably have other defenders in your team that you could rotate him with. But then he's got 2 promoted teams in game weeks 2 and 3. And you can see there, decent amount of clean sheets. You know, it's very comparable to other players on this list. Decent amount of attacking returns as well. And then 2 promoted teams in game weeks 2 and 3. And I think Fulham are looking quite strong going into this season. So I think he's an option as well. But I put Dan Burn in here as well because, yes, I think Lewis Hall is going to play at left back, but we don't really have a lot of historic data to go by on Lewis Hall. So I was kind of suggesting, why don't we look at the data for the first choice left back for Newcastle last season, and that'll give a bit of an idea as to how Lewis Hall will do. And you can see the rest of the players on this list here. Let me know in the comments who your favourite 4.5 million defenders are. Now, before getting on to talking about my midfield and strikers, what I wanted to do was have another look at the Rob T FPL projected data from the spread betting markets. This one I think is really interesting. There are so many players on this, it's going to be impossible to go through on the video. But what this is a projected top players basically for projected goal involvements across the season. And I think when you pick your midfielders and forwards in FPL, you want to look at these bookmakers, you know, projections for players that are expected to get the most attacking returns. I don't think there are any real major surprises in terms of who the top guys are. They're all the, you know, well-known and trusted FPL assets from seasons gone by, right? But interestingly, Haaland comes out way on top of anyone else. He's expected to get 5 more returns across the season than Salah is. Salah on 28.5, Haaland on 33.5. So 2 of these guys, you know, ahead of quite a lot of the opposition. Saka, interestingly, I've not had him in my team at all yet. He's 27.5 projected returns, which is only 1 less than Mo Salah, which is obviously a very respectable total, right? So, yeah, I'm not going to go through them all, but I've used this data to help inform who I'm picking in my midfield. And my midfield looks like this. I've gone for Mo Salah, who I think, looking Ipswich away game week 1, I think he's probably the best captain. He is, according to Fantasy Football Hub, the top player for expected points. Anthony Gordon had an absolute barnstormer last year, back in the Newcastle team in pre-season, scored yesterday. I'm recording this on Sunday the 11th. He scored in a pre-season game against Girona on Saturday. He looks really good. And yeah, we all know how good he was last season. I think 7.5 million is a very decent price for him. He's going to play every minute of every game he's fit for, in my mind, for Newcastle. Eberechi Eze ticks very similar boxes in my mind to Anthony Gordon. Those expected points totals for him are really, really good as well. It's amongst some of the highest of the midfielders in the entire game, to be honest. He, without Elise in the team, I think is just going to be Crystal Palace's absolute talisman. He's going to be taking penalties, going to be taking free kicks. And Crystal Palace under their new manager was so much improved last season. So, yeah, I've got big expectations for Eze. I think he's going to do well and looking forward to owning him in my team. I've gone for Emile Smith-Rowe, but what I'll actually do is skip over that because I wanted to do a little feature on midfielders at this price category because I just think there are so many you could pick from. And it's a shame really to miss a player in this price category because I think ultimately you should probably start with one and then just pick the one who emerges as the best later on. And then I've gone for Nkunku. I'm a little bit unsure about this, and you'll see this isn't actually the only draft I'm considering. I'll chuck in a couple more at the end of the video. Maybe they don't have Nkunku in because I'm a little bit doubtful about him. I do really like him as a player and an option. Man City at home first up is obviously not the best fixture, but once you get that out of the way, the fixtures for Chelsea are good. Wolves and Crystal Palace game weeks 2 and 3. He's obviously a really good player. Come back from injury, had a good pre-season. Manager's been singing his praises. I think he's going to do all right, but I would say I'm a little bit unsure about Nkunku. I'm trying to big him up as much as possible, but of the 11 players that I've picked in my starting lineup so far, I'm probably the most unsure about Nkunku. When I spoke about Emile Smith-Rowe back then, I mentioned that I've gone for him. I don't necessarily, hugely back him to be an absolute barnstormer this season. But I do think there are so many midfielders in the game at the 5 to 5.5 million price tag that it's worth having one in your team. And then eventually, if one emerges to be the top, way above anyone else at this price tag, then you just get them in after a few game weeks. There are so many, as you can see on this list. These players, I would say, quite a lot of them are pickable. My favourites, I've tried to do a little extract here where I square them off in red here. Semenyo, now Solanke has left Bournemouth, I think there's a big gap in terms of where the goals come from. And I think quite a lot of them are going to come from Semenyo. Who exactly is going to be the Bournemouth penalty taker remains to be seen. Kluivert took one in pre-season. I can't remember if Semenyo was on the pitch at the time. That could mean Kluivert is the confirmed Bournemouth penalty taker. He had a decent season last year out. Decent for expected points, 5.5 million as well. Minter comes with huge praise from his previous club at Brighton now. He's had a really good pre-season. I think he's going to have a good year for Brighton. It's just those opening fixtures for Brighton are not all that great. Everton away, Man United at home, Arsenal away. Tough fixtures to kick off. Jacob Murphy, I believe it's Jacob, not Josh Murphy, who plays for Newcastle. He's done really well in pre-season and actually looks like he's probably earned himself a place in the Newcastle starting lineup. Hudson-Odoi of Nottingham Forest, I think, will be absolutely fine. Likewise, Alanga as well. I think the two of them will play very similar minutes and get a decent amount of returns. And then Morgan Rogers, I would back him to play for Aston Villa with Diaby leaving for Saudi Arabia. Exactly how well he does and exactly how many returns Rogers gets, I think, remains to be seen. I've seen a lot of Aston Villa fans absolutely singing his praises. Unai Emery absolutely loves him. Some people are backing him to be this season's Cole Palmer, right? Remains to be seen exactly how he gets on. And then you've got Emil Smith-Rowe as well, who I picked in my team. So, like I said, I think it's sensible to pick a 5 or 5.5 million midfielder. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter who you go for at this stage, I don't think, as long as you hop on the one that emerges as the best at the right point in time. So here's how the front two of my team are looking. Then I've obviously gone for a 3-5-2 here. Haaland and Isak. I think these two are two of the best strikers in the game. I don't really need to say a whole lot about them. I've gone for Haaland because I don't necessarily think he's the best captain in game week 1, I'll admit. But game weeks 2 and 3, I think he probably is the best captain, particularly that Ipswich at home fixture in game week 2. I think you don't have Haaland for that game, you're going to be a little bit worried, so I'd rather have him. Isak just got a crazy level of returns for the amount of minutes he played for Newcastle last season. You look at the expected points there. Salah, Haaland, Isak in terms of captaincy game week 1. There's really not a whole lot in it. I think Isak's going to be fantastic. He is, I believe, the penalty taker for Newcastle. Even when Wilson was on the pitch last season, he handed off the ball to Isak to take a pen. He missed one during pre-season though, so you just never know. But he got a lot of returns last season. He actually got more goals than Ollie Watkins did by playing, I think, nearly 20 less games. So kind of says it all, really. He's, I think, a fantastic option. Plug this team into the Fantasy Football Hub AI tool. 95% AI rating, 66.6 expected points when you captain Mo Salah. As for the bench, 4 million goalkeepers. There's so many. None of them are going to play. I went for Bentley. Robinson of Fulham, like I said, I really like those game weeks 2 and 3 fixtures, and I think he rotates quite nicely with both Mikalenko and Lewis Hall. Stewart, 4.5 million placeholder striker. I figured I'm never going to use my third bench option, so he can just go there. Obviously, I should put him third on my bench. And then Barco, I believe, is the outstanding 4 million defender, but Brighton look to be in the market for a new left back. So yeah, does Barco actually start the season? I'm not 100% sure. If he doesn't, I'll just go for Wout Faes. Someone like that, a starting defender from one of the bottom teams, just to have them on my bench, basically. One thing I would say, just before we get into some other alternative teams, another projected thing from Rob T FPL on Twitter, I'm calling them projected things at the moment. He's found that there are some betting market odds for the top FPL point scorer, and from that he's been able to derive a projected points total as per spread betting markets. So what we've got here is a view of the expected top scorers in FPL via betting markets. So using all of the good money and algorithms that gambling companies spend on projected outcomes has been fished into or pushed into projecting FPL points. You can pause this, I'm not going to go through them all, but what this does, a little bonus after watching to see my draft, these are the top players according to the bookmaker odds to get the top points in FPL. Okay, so with the sign-in of Dominic Solanke going to Spurs, that has really made me think about my FPL team. The team I've just showed you, up until Solanke signed for Spurs, was pretty much nailed on. I really like the signing of Solanke for Spurs, and I think he scores a good number of goals this season, at least 20. He nearly got 20 last year, scored 19 for Bournemouth, right? And I've had a play around with fitting him in my team. Now, at the moment, because the move's only just been confirmed, the expected points data isn't quite there yet in the Fantasy Football Hub algorithm. So just have to, pretend he's a Spurs player when you're looking at this, right? This is the team I can build with Solanke in it, and I quite like it. The difference is basically from the team I've just showed you, I've swapped Gordon for Solanke, and it actually allows me to get a starting 4.5 million mid in there as well, which I think is quite exciting. So yeah, could I potentially get Solanke in? Another team I've made with him in has Guardiola instead of Trent and then Gordon instead of Nkunku, and I think actually this one's probably a little bit better because I said already that I have a little bit of doubt about Nkunku, his minutes and his exact level of returns, injury record, etc. I think this team is sort of the best of both worlds. I don't quite have Trent, but I've got Guardiola, who I think is going to be almost as good as Trent. I can have Gordon in instead of Nkunku, who I think is a much better option. Still have Smith Rowe, Eze and Salah. I've spoken about that 5.5 million midfielder role. Whether I think Smith Rowe is going to be the best, not entirely sure. If one emerges as the best, I get them in. But I do, like I said, I do really like Solanke at Spurs, and I think he's going to do well this season. So I have to be cognizant of that. And I'd say my final FPL draft will either look like this or the team that I just spent most of the video going through. I must say, like most players at the moment, I'm really torn between where I go. And it might be the projected points being added to the tool and an updated AI rating that swings it for me. But yeah, this team and the one that I've just showed you, I think I'm getting close. All right, and that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments what you think of those teams. If there are any changes you would make. I'd be interested to hear it in the comments. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more from me all the way up to the start of the season and beyond, you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just here on your screen. That just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching. Sorry for the lag, by the way. My laptop has really struggled when I've recorded this video, and there's just been nothing I can do to fix it. So the frame rate of my face moving when I talk might seem a little bit strange on this video, so apologies for that. I'll aim to have it fixed next time. But I figured it was dealable with, and I'd rather get out a video than just wait for my laptop to magically fix itself. So we'll try and get to the bottom of that. I'll catch you in my next video.